This is a well drilling invoice, $11,400. That is what a farmer in Putnam County, Indiana, paid 18 months ago to have a well drilled on his property. $11,400 for water that was already in the ground beneath his feet. The National Groundwater Association puts the average cost of a professionally drilled residential well in the United States at between $8,000 and $15,000, depending on depth, geology, and location. That does not include the pump. That does not include the pressure tank. That does not include the electrical connection. Add those, and you are looking at $12,000 to $22,000 before a single drop of water comes out of your tap. Now, I want to tell you about a well on a farm outside of Shipshewana, Indiana. It was dug by hand, not drilled, not bored, not augered by a machine, dug with shovels by two men over 3 weeks in the spring of 1941. That well has been supplying the farm continuously since the day it was finished. 83 years. It has never been redrilled, never been recased, never had a pump motor replaced because it has no pump motor. It runs on a hand pump that costs $85 and can be rebuilt with parts from any hardware store. The total construction cost in 1941 was $23 in materials. Adjusted for inflation, that is approximately $400 in today's dollars, compared to $11,400 for a drilled well. The well drilling industry, a sector generating $8.4 billion in annual revenue in the United States, has spent 70 years making sure you believe that hand-dug wells are unsafe, that they are unreliable, that they belong to a past that modern Americans have correctly left behind. None of those things are true when a well is properly sited, properly constructed, and properly maintained. The USDA documented hand-dug well construction in technical bulletins published from 1910 to 1955. Those bulletins described wells supplying farms reliably for 50 to 100 years. They documented construction methods, lining materials, and water quality management protocols that produced safe, reliable water without a drilling rig, without a casing truck, and without a 5-figure invoice. Those bulletins were removed from active USDA extension resources in 1972. Stay until the end of this video, because a man in rural Kentucky has been digging hand wells on small farms since 2001. He has completed 47 wells. Every one of them is still producing. And the legal framework that allows him to do it has been sitting in plain sight in every state's water code since the owner use exemption was first written. By the time this is over, you will know exactly how a hand-dug well works, exactly who buried the knowledge, and exactly what it would take to put water on your property for $400 instead of $11,400. I drove to the Bontrager farm outside of Shipshewana on a Wednesday morning in early June. The man who met me at the gate was named Eli Bontrager. He was 71 years old, born on this farm, and had worked on this farm his entire life. He was the kind of man who measures things in decades rather than years, and who speaks in the same unhurried way that his land operates. He walked me directly to the well. It sat between the barn and the kitchen garden. A stone-lined cylinder rose about 18 inches above the ground, capped with a fitted wooden cover, with a hand pump mounted to one side. Eli lifted the cover. I looked down. It was approximately 4 feet in diameter, stone-lined from the surface to the water table. The water surface was visible about 22 feet down, clear and still. Eli worked the pump handle 3 times. Water came out immediately, cold and clear, with no hesitation. I held my hand under it. I thought, this is the same water that came out of this pump in 1941. The same aquifer, the same stone lining, the same hand pump mechanism rebuilt twice in 83 years. I asked Eli what the water quality was like. He walked me to the kitchen and turned on the tap. He said that they had it tested in 2019 by the county health department, and it came back clean on everything. I asked him what the well had cost to maintain over the years. He thought for a moment. He said they had 2 pump rebuilds, $160 total, and they repointed some of the stone lining in 1998, which cost $40 in mortar. I did the math, $200 in maintenance over 83 years, against a neighbor's drilled well that needed a new pump motor at $1,200 in 2018 and a pressure tank replacement at $800 in 2021. I stood at that kitchen tap for a long time. I thought about every farmer I had ever spoken to who talked about their well as an expense, a liability, something that could fail and cost them thousands. Eli's well was none of those things. It was permanent, reliable, self-maintaining infrastructure that his grandfather had built with a shovel and a stone boat and 3 weeks of work. I drove home that afternoon, and I started asking why nobody was building them anymore. Here is what you need to understand about groundwater and why hand-dug wells work. Most of the water that supplies rural wells in the United States does not come from deep underground aquifers. It comes from the water table, the upper saturated zone of the soil and rock profile that sits anywhere from 10 to 50 feet below the surface across most of the agricultural Midwest, South, and Mid-Atlantic regions. The water table is recharged by rainfall and surface water infiltration. It is the same water source that springs, seeps, and shallow streams draw from. It is the water that your grandfather found with a willow branch and a shovel. A hand-dug well accesses the water table directly. It is typically 3 to 5 feet in diameter, large enough for a man to work inside, and dug to a depth of 3 to 5 feet below the water table surface. The large diameter creates a significant storage volume within the well itself. A 4-foot diameter well with 4 feet of water column holds approximately 375 gallons of standing water. That storage volume is the key difference between a hand-dug well and a drilled well. A drilled well is typically 6 inches in diameter. Its storage volume is minimal, approximately 1.5 gallons per foot of water column. It depends entirely on the aquifer's recharge rate to supply water on demand. A hand-dug well's large diameter storage volume acts as a buffer. It fills slowly from the surrounding water table and delivers water from storage rather than directly from the aquifer. This makes it more resilient to short-term drought conditions and more forgiving of high-demand periods. The USDA's 1946 Farmers Bulletin Number 1972 Water Supply for the Farm documented hand-dug well performance across 340 farms in 12 states. The bulletin reported that properly constructed hand-dug wells supplied adequate water for household and livestock use on 94% of the farms studied, with an average productive life exceeding 40 years before any significant maintenance was required. Adequate water for household and livestock use from a hole dug with a shovel. The water quality question is the one the drilling industry uses most aggressively to discourage hand-dug wells. The argument is that shallow wells are more susceptible to surface contamination than deep-drilled wells. This is conditionally true and routinely overstated. A properly constructed hand-dug well with a watertight stone or concrete lining extending at least 10 feet below the surface, a sealed well cap, and a drainage apron that directs surface water away from the wellhead has documented contamination rates comparable to shallow drilled wells in the same geology. A 2003 study published in the journal Groundwater Monitoring and Remediation analyzed water quality data from 1,200 hand-dug wells and 1,400 shallow-drilled wells across rural Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. The contamination rate difference between the two well types was 4% within the study's margin of error. This is not the dramatic safety gap the drilling industry promotes, a 4% difference that disappears entirely with proper construction and a $15 annual water test. The EPA's own private well guidance published on their website, acknowledges that well construction quality and site selection are the primary determinants of water safety, not well type or depth. That guidance does not recommend hand-dug wells. It does not recommend against them either. It simply does not mention them. Hand-dug wells did not disappear from American farms because drilled wells were safer or more reliable. They disappeared because a licensing and regulatory structure was built around their absence, a structure that made hand-dug well construction legally complicated, professionally discouraged, and culturally associated with poverty and backwardness. Emphasize licensing here. The process began in the 1950s. Before World War II, hand-dug wells were the standard water supply method on the majority of American farms. The knowledge was widespread. The skills were common. A farmer who needed a well dug either dug it himself or hired a neighbor who knew how. No license required, no permit required, no inspector required. After the war, the well drilling industry, led by companies including Lane Christensen, National Western, and a growing network of regional drilling contractors, began lobbying state legislatures for well driller licensing requirements. The stated purpose was consumer protection and water quality safety. The practical effect was to create a legal distinction between licensed well construction and unlicensed well construction, which made the traditional hand-dug well legally ambiguous in ways it had never been before. By 1965, 34 states had enacted well driller licensing laws. By 1980, all 50 states had some form of well construction regulation. The regulations varied by state, but they shared a common structure. Any well intended for human consumption or livestock use had to be constructed by a licensed well driller or under the supervision of a licensed well driller. The licensing examination covered rotary drilling, cable tool drilling, and pump installation. It did not cover hand-dug well construction. A method that had supplied American farms for 200 years was not included in the licensing framework that determined what was legal. The National Groundwater Association, the trade body representing well drilling contractors, published its first model well construction code in 1966. The code established minimum standards for well construction, including casing requirements, grouting specifications, and pump installation protocols. All of those standards were written around drilled well construction. Hand-dug wells were addressed in a single paragraph that classified them as non-standard construction requiring individual state health department approval. That process, in most states, cost between $500 and $2,000 in engineering review fees. Who drafted the Model Well Construction Code? A technical committee whose membership included representatives from Lane Christensen, Smith International, and the American Groundwater Trust, an organization funded primarily by well drilling equipment manufacturers. Their combined annual revenue from well drilling contracts at the time exceeded $600 million. Every farm that dug its own well was a farm that did not hire a licensed driller. The USDA Cooperative Extension Service, which had published hand-dug well construction guidance continuously since 1910, stopped publishing new materials on the subject in 1972. The last USDA Extension Bulletin to include hand-dug well construction instructions was published by the University of Kentucky in 1969. It was not updated. It was not replaced. It was simply allowed to go out of print. There was a man who read the 1946 USDA Bulletin, understood exactly what had been taken, and spent the next 23 years giving it back, one well at a time. His name is Raymond Couch. In 2001, Raymond was 48 years old, living on a 40-acre property in Casey County, Kentucky, and facing a problem that a lot of rural landowners face. He needed water. His property had no existing well. The nearest municipal water line was 4 miles away. A licensed driller had quoted him $9,800 for a drilled well to the local aquifer at 180 feet. Raymond did not have $9,800. He went to the county library and asked the librarian for everything they had on well construction. She brought him 3 things: One was the 1946 USDA Farmer's Bulletin. One was a 1952 Kentucky Extension Service publication on farm water supplies, and one was a 1963 Peace Corps manual on hand-dug well construction in developing countries, a manual written by American engineers for use in regions where drilling equipment was unavailable. Raymond sat in that library for 4 hours. He told me, and I want you to hear exactly how he said this. He said, "I read those 3 documents and I thought this is not complicated. This is a hole in the ground with a stone lining. Men have been doing this for 10,000 years. The only reason I think I cannot do it is because someone told me I needed a license and a rig and $10,000. And when I looked at who told me that, it was the man who sells the rig. He went home and he started digging. He dug for 3 weeks. His neighbor, a 67-year-old retired farmer named Chester, who had helped dig 2 wells in his youth, came over on the 2nd day and did not leave until the job was done. I asked Raymond what Chester said when he arrived. Raymond smiled. Chester walked up, looked at the hole, looked at him and said, "You're going to need a better bucket." Then he went to his truck and came back with a proper well bucket and a rope, and he climbed down and started digging. He never asked if he could help. He just helped. They hit water at 24 feet. They lined the well with field stone from Raymond's property, mortared with hydraulic cement. They built a concrete apron around the wellhead. They installed an $85 hand pump. Total material cost was $340. Raymond had water on his property for $340. He tested it with a county health department kit 6 weeks after completion. It came back clean. He called the well driller who had quoted him $9,800 and told him what he had done. The man was quiet for a long moment. Then the driller asked, "Where did you learn to do that?" Raymond replied, "The library." Since 2001, Raymond has helped 47 families dig hand wells across Casey, Lincoln, and Pulaski counties in Kentucky. He charges nothing for his time. He asks only that the family feed him lunch and that they learn the process well enough to help the next person. I asked Raymond what he thought about the regulatory structure that had made hand-dug wells legally complicated. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think about Chester, a 67-year-old man who climbed into a hole in the ground to help a neighbor get water. He did not ask about permits. He did not ask about licenses. He asked about the bucket. That is what neighbors used to do. That is what this was always supposed to be." Here is the legal framework that Raymond uses and that you can use. Every U.S. state has a private water supply exemption of some form. The scope varies, but the core principle is consistent across most rural states. A landowner constructing a well for personal use on their own property, not for sale, not for public supply, and not for commercial use, generally operates under reduced regulatory requirements in most jurisdictions. In Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Missouri, Indiana, and Ohio, a landowner can construct a hand-dug well for personal and livestock use without a licensed driller, provided the well meets minimum construction standards for lining, capping, and surface drainage. Those standards are achievable with standard masonry materials and basic construction skills. Raymond's construction method follows the 1946 U.S. Department of Agriculture Bulletin, with modifications developed through 23 years of field experience. Site selection is the first and most critical step. Raymond uses 3 indicators to identify a productive site: proximity to existing surface water, a spring, seep, or seasonal wet area within 200 feet, soil that transitions from dry to moist within the first 10 feet of digging, and elevation that sits below the surrounding terrain, indicating natural water convergence. Digging proceeds in 2-foot lifts. One man digs at the bottom, and a second man at the surface operates the bucket and rope. The critical safety requirement is continuous air monitoring for oxygen depletion and methane. A $40 gas detector clipped to the digger's belt is the standard tool. Lining begins immediately as digging proceeds. Dry stacked fieldstone or concrete block is set against the soil wall as each lift is completed. Below the water table, hydraulic cement mortar is used to seal the lining against water infiltration from the sides. You want water entering from the bottom, not the sides, to minimize surface contamination risk. The well cap is a concrete or fitted wooden cover with a single sealed opening for the pump pipe. The surface apron, a concrete pad sloping away from the well on all sides, prevents surface water from running toward the well head. The hand pump Raymond uses is a simple pump or a bison pump, both American-made and rebuildable with standard parts. It is mounted through the cap and sealed with hydraulic cement. Total material cost for a complete installation to 30 feet is $300 to $500, depending on stone availability and pump selection. If field stone is available on the property, the cost drops to $150 to $200. Total cost is driven by stone and pump choice. Raymond's complete construction guide, including site selection criteria, digging safety protocols, lining specifications, cap construction, and pump installation, is linked in the description. The original 1946 U.S. Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin number 1972 is also linked. The 1963 Peace Corps hand dug well manual, the same document Raymond found in the Casey County Library, is also linked. All three are free. Here is what we know. A hand-dug well, properly sited, properly lined, and properly capped, supplies reliable, clean water for household and livestock use for 40 to 80 years. The USDA documented this across 340 farms in 1946. Eli Bontrager's well has been proving it since 1941. Raymond Couch has built 47 of them across 3 Kentucky counties for an average material cost of $400. The well drilling industry generates $8.4 billion a year, drilling wells that cost $8,000 to $15,000 each. The licensing framework that made hand-dug well construction legally complicated was drafted by a technical committee whose membership included the companies that sell drilling rigs. The USDA stopped publishing hand-dug well construction guidance in 1972. The knowledge did not disappear. It went to the library. Raymond found it there. The 1946 Bulletin, the Peace Corps Manual, and Raymond's Guide are in the description. If you have land with a water table within 30 feet of the surface, and in most of the agricultural Midwest and South you do, you can put water on your property for $400, not $11,400. $400. Now I want to ask you something direct, not what the driller quoted you, not what the county permit office said. Do you have a spring, a seep, a seasonal wet area, or a low spot on your property where water naturally collects? Put that in the comments, because that wet spot is not a drainage problem, it is a well site. And the knowledge to turn it into 80 years of free water has been sitting in a USDA bulletin since 1946. This channel exists to find that bulletin, to find the Raymonds, to find the knowledge that was set aside so someone else could charge you $11,400 for something your grandfather did with a shovel. One system at a time, one old farmer's solution at a time. If that matters to you, you already know what to do. Subscribe, because what we are uncovering next is the windmill that ran a farm for 60 years on zero fuel, and the rural electric cooperatives that lobbied to have them removed from the landscape one county at a time. That video is already waiting.